To me, a new Smash game has always been inevitable, less of an if and more of a when. I don't think there's ever going to be a final Smash game, the same way there's never going to be a final Call of Duty or Pokemon game. As is the common story, when a new Nintendo console releases, a new Smash game follows closely behind. And, as is the common story, excluding Melee, the bulk of players tend to leave the previous Smash game behind once the newest title releases. The community moves on, the meta resets, and a new era begins. This fate, more likely than not, is the one that Smash Ultimate will meet in the coming years, for better or for worse. And that's why I wanted to make this video. Before the next chapter begins, I want to take a step back and look at everything Ultimate brought to the table. The highs, the lows, big battlefield, small battlefield, Minecraft Steve, Piranha Plant. And while I may be providing praise, I won't be pulling any punches either. This is my full retrospective and review of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. There are timestamps for every segment of this video provided, so if you want to watch it chapter by chapter or find specific parts and just watch those, you can do that. I'm going to try to talk about as much of the game as I can, but I'm not going to talk about absolutely every little thing, as this video would wind up being several hours longer, and frankly, no one has time for that. At the end of each fitting chapter, I'll provide a score out of 10 for the feature, mode, or topic discussed, and the game as a whole will receive a score out of 10 at the end as well. Also, remember, opinions shared in this video are just that. Opinions. Please do not take anything I say too seriously or too personally. At the end of the day, it's just a game. With that out of the way, please enjoy. Speaking as someone who's played every single Smash game to date, some more obsessively than others, Ultimate always felt like the perfect blend of its predecessors. It captured Melee's technical edge and speed, while also embracing the accessibility and polish of Smash 4. It was fast, but not too overwhelming. Deep, but not too alienating. It struck a balance that made it feel like the most complete version of Smash I'd ever seen. There's something here for everyone. For the hardcore players, there's a myriad of customization options that allow for the best competitive rule sets, and there's a surprising level of character balance. Even though some fighters are clearly stronger than others, you could use just about any character in the game and find success in a tournament setting, with enough effort. And for the casuals, there's over 100 stages to pick from, over 80 different items, plenty of new and returning characters that can be summoned via Pokeballs or assist trophies, and a bunch of different rule set customizations that change the flow of the game to make it less like a fighting game and more like a party game. While Ultimate shares a great deal of its gameplay foundations with its predecessor Smash 4, as it was largely built off of it, it also adds a great deal of new mechanics that add more nuance to its combat, starting off with the new Perfect Shield. Unlike the Perfect Shield from previous Smash games, where you'd have to press your shield button right when an attack connected to negate shield stun, Ultimate's form of the mechanic, sometimes called a parry, has you release your shield right as an attack would hit it, and if executed correctly, provides you a window to punish your opponent that would otherwise be much tighter or outright non-existent. It provides an additional layer to the game where, with enough precision and analysis of your opponent's habits, even an opponent using nothing but generally safe, fast moves could have their game plan thwarted. It forces players to mash less and strategize more. Rolls, spot dodges, and air dodges also all received some much-needed tweaks in Ultimate. When overused, these options have their intangibility reduced and their lag increased. This was a change that discouraged spamming and rewarded more thoughtful defense. Air dodging got changed the most, because along with the previously mentioned changes, air dodges were also limited to once per air time, and Ultimate reintroduced an altered version of the directional air dodge from Melee, allowing you to change your direction and speed in the air, the only caveat being that there is much more inactionable time in the air while directional air dodging as compared to a normal air dodge. It provides players another option for recovering and mixing up their movement. Also, the 4 traditional fighting game characters on the roster, Ryu and Ken from Street Fighter, Terry from Fatal Fury, and Kazuya from Tekken, All now face their opponents at all times in 1v1 battles to more closely represent how they fight in their source games. The gameplay changes made in Ultimate all feel like they were done in a strong effort to subtly bring more polish, strategy, and thought into every corner of normal gameplay, discouraging mindless mashing and encouraging adaptation. I can't really imagine more fun, balanced, and overall quality Smash gameplay on a fundamental level than what we got with Ultimate. Overall, I'd give Ultimate's general gameplay a 10 out of 10. Newcomers are the lifeblood of Smash, which is why Nintendo has put a lot of effort into their character reveals, with the production value of the announcements seeming to rise with each game. In the age of Ultimate, a character being announced wasn't just an advertisement or a statement, it was a community and, in some cases, a cultural event. Let's go through every single Newcomer announcement and what they each meant to me, starting with the base game. The first fully new character announcement for Ultimate, before we even knew it was called Ultimate, was Inkling. I was honestly kinda shocked that Inkling wasn't already in Smash as a DLC fighter for Smash 4. Splatoon was Nintendo's first truly successful, fully new IP in a while, so it only made sense for them to be included, and I'm happy they were. It would have been weirder if they weren't. But I'm glad they bundled them with the announcement of a new Smash game, because without that, there wouldn't have been much of a shock factor here. The Splatoon music added to this game, especially the remixes, are all outstanding, and while Moray Towers may not be a very fun stage, in my opinion, it's a great representation of Splatoon as a franchise. The second new character announcement for Ultimate was Ridley, and this announcement had some layers to it. The surface layer showed that a non-Samus Metroid character had been added to Smash for the first time, and that he looks metal as hell, both facts of which are very cool. The second layer to this announcement was the impression it left on me and other fans. I'm not going to pretend like I personally really wanted Ridley in Smash. I've barely played Metroid and don't really have any attachment to the character outside of his role in Brawl's story mode. The reason I, and so many others, wanted Ridley in Smash was because of the sheer quantity of people that requested him over the years. And with him being included at the end of a Smash Direct that already appeased the majority of fans, this announcement made it truly feel like Nintendo was intending on listening to fans from now on. Even the announcement tagline references the anti-Ridley and Smash memes about him being too big to fit on a stage. The third newcomer announced for Ultimate was Simon Belmont, yet another long-awaited character to be included in Smash. I don't have a lot of feelings about the character himself, but the trailer and the way he was translated into Smash is really cool. I am really happy they went with the barbarian design and not the sexy red-haired one with the boots with the fur, but the real greatness of Belmont's inclusion to me is the music. Good lord, the Castlevania music in this game is so good. The Lost Painting remix is an all-timer. And along with that, they added Dracula's Castle, one of my favorite new stages based on visuals alone, and they brought in Castlevania's Dracula as a boss for World of Light, and some classic mode runs. Overall, they really got the most out of this crossover as they could, and that's great. The fourth newcomer to Ultimate was King K. Rool. This reveal truly sealed the deal for me and many others. Nintendo was truly in it to please the fans this time around. People no longer had to silently pray for their character of choice to be drawn out of a hat by a Nintendo exec. If a character was highly requested, and they could get the rights, they were getting in. And regardless of your opinions on this big, fat crocodile's inclusion, what he represents to the fans is so valuable. His design in Ultimate is truly befitting of a king. His moveset's references hit home just how dedicated the Smash team was to being faithful to the source material this time around. Gone are the days of fighters being added and feeling like their design doesn't truly represent the character. The fifth newcomer to Ultimate was Isabelle. Weirdly enough, I never realized that she was the only base game newcomer announced outside of a Smash-specific direct. I don't really know how to feel about her inclusion. It's cool that she's here, but she doesn't really bring a lot to the table. The vast majority of her moves are extremely similar, if not the exact same, as Villagers, including her dash attack, her up, forward, back, and down aerials, her down and side tilts, her grab, her neutral and up specials, even her final smash is fundamentally the same. Also, in-game, she doesn't make any of those silly Animal Crossing noises, and it feels super off that those sound effects are just nowhere to be found, not even in a taunt. Isabelle is also an example of a trend in Smash's character inclusions that I don't particularly like, that I affectionately call additions. Additions are characters blatantly included in Smash for the sake of advertising a product. Right after Isabelle's announcement, like in the same cinematic, they announced that a new Animal Crossing game is coming to Switch. I'd say Isabelle is the least egregious addition to the game, as she does have a dedicated fanbase, but she still falls under the category. Another much worse example of an addition character would be Corrin from Fire Emblem as part of Smash 4's DLC. When they were announced, the game they came from hadn't even been released yet in North America and Europe. Now listen, in a sense, every character's inclusion in Smash is an advertisement. Seeing a character in Smash is very likely to make you want to check out their source games. It's only natural. For example, I don't think people would care about Earthbound nearly as much today if Ness and Lucas weren't in Smash. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who tried Fire Emblem when Marth and Roy were added to Melee, or Xenoblade Chronicles when Shulk was added in Smash 4, because of the character or brand recognition bridging that gap. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but in my opinion, Smash is about representing characters who are beloved and have a history, and not characters that will eventually have a history and may be beloved. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. Now on to the sixth and final fighter added to Ultimate's base roster was Incineroar. I feel like everyone was a bit harsh on this announcement when it first happened, due to the widely popular and since disproven Grinch leak that happened right before the final base game Smash Direct, which promised a lot more than one fully new fighter reveal for the base game. I was honestly fully expecting a new Pokemon rep, as were most people, as it's kind of a Smash tradition, but also I was expecting Decidueye, since I felt like their design was the strongest out of the final Evolution trilogy of Sun and Moon, but I was completely fine with this reveal. It felt kind of weird to have a semi-basic brawler and another final evolution Firestarter Pokemon of all things as the last character on the base roster of the biggest Smash game of all time, but his design won me over. It oozes with personality, with many of his attacks ending with a taunting animation when they land, and along with his general wrestling heel persona, he convinced me that while he wasn't my preferred choice, he wasn't a bad choice either. And when the game came out, he wound up being one of my favorite characters to play, too. Overall, the number of fully new fighters in base game Ultimate only being 6 characters provides a stark contrast to the 17 added in the previous title. But these new fighters make up for it in their fan service, their gameplay, and everything else their inclusions brought to the table. Also, I'm leaving a bit of leeway for the small number of newcomers since they brought back every single fighter in Smash history for this game, many of which likely had to be remade from scratch. With that in mind, I'll give the base game newcomers an 8.5 out of 10, and the base game roster as a whole a 10 out of 10. Before segueing into my thoughts on the DLC newcomers, I want to take a step back for a moment. I've seen a lot of discussions about the oversaturation of certain franchises in Smash. I've seen some people complain about the Mario franchise's character count on the roster, and if we count the extended universe, there are 14 characters, and that is a lot, but come on, it's Mario. There was no world out there where Mario wasn't going to have the most reps in a crossover fighting game made by Nintendo. But the most popular discussions and arguments about franchise oversaturation surround the two franchises tied for second place in terms of roster slot count, Pokemon and Fire Emblem, both having 8 slots on the roster. I've seen people on both sides of this argument, some calling for less Pokemon, some calling for less Fire Emblem, and many others calling for both to have their real estate on the roster reduced. And I'm here today to throw my hat in the ring and tell you why Pokemon's continued increase in their number of fighters is much less egregious than Fire Emblem's ever was. Now, I know that sounds biased, and it largely is, but let me try to explain my perspective. For starters, let's examine the archetypes of the Fire Emblem reps.
Marth,
Swordsman,
Lucina,
Swordswoman,
Roy,
Swordsman,
Chrom,
Swordsman,
Ike,
Swordsman,
Robin,
actually Mage with a sword, and just when you think they're beginning to deviate,
Corrin,
Swordsman. Okay, to be fair, Byleth, Corrin, Robin, and to an extent Ike are all pretty unique, and while the Fire Emblem reps generally share a similar style of combat, they all play pretty differently. But you do see the pattern, right? On the other hand, let's look at Pokemon's reps.
Pikachu,
Small body lightweight mouse.
Jigglypuff,
Balloon glass cannon.
Pichu,
Small body glass cannon mouse.
Mewtwo,
Legendary large body telekinesis user.
Pokemon Trainer,
3 characters in one. One is a hard-hitting, long-surviving dragon, one is an all-rounder quadruped, and one is a combo-centric small body, all of which can be swapped to the next at any time.
Lucario,
Mid-sized combo character with a damage-based comeback mechanic.
Greninja,
A high-execution ninja.
Incineroar,
A grappler who plays the heal role. There's pretty evident inequality in the creativity found in Pokemon's reps compared to Fire Emblem's. I'm not going to say what should be done with Fire Emblem's share of the roster in future games, and I'm not saying that your favorite fighter should be removed. But I will say that as long as both franchises provide creative new gameplay styles in their new reps going forward, I would be happy with both their levels of representation remaining consistent with how it is in Ultimate. Okay, full transparency here. The original plan was to write in depth about how I felt about all the DLC newcomers, like I did with the base game ones, but I realized that it was tedious and boring since I don't have a ton to say about most of them. So we're gonna do the... In Wave 1, we've got... Absolutely nobody expected him, and he's fun to play. Awesome design, brought great music, probably one of the more hype characters in Smash. I hate RNG, but the way it was implemented into Hero's kit is functionally cool, at least. This character getting in meant everything to me. Probably the most stylish and flashy traditional fighting game character in Smash. An unsatisfying and, to many, a disappointing ending addition to the first Fighter's Pass. Would have been better if they were in the middle of the pass instead of the end, if they had to be here. I'll give the first Fighter's Pass newcomers an 8 out of 10. Alright, on to Fighter's Pass 2. 2 additions back-to-back is crazy, and she's generally obnoxious to play against. Probably one of the most broken characters in Smash history, but this character getting in meant everything to me. Added necessary villain representation and fixed the lack of Final Fantasy music in Smash. He's also one of the more balanced DLC fighters. I heard Xenoblade 2 was good. Adding another Pokemon trainer-like character after all this time is awesome, even if it's just 2 swordies. Probably one of the most broken characters in Smash history, but his implementation in Smash is really cool, and he's fun to play, even non-optimally. This character getting in meant everything to a lot of people. Not necessarily me, but he was one of the most requested fighters ever, and seeing a Mickey Mouse symbol on a Smash fighter is absolutely insane. I'll give the Fighter's Pass 2 newcomers a 9 out of 10. Thus concludes the DLC Newcomer Lightning Round. There is a bit more to say about the DLC, though. It's kind of an open secret that Smash Ultimate, in the eyes of many, is a pay-to-win game. And while I don't fully agree with that sentiment, I can definitely see where that's coming from. Not unlike Smash 4, the undisputed best character in this game is DLC, and this time, his name is Steve. Like the game he comes from, the only limit to his destructive power is your imagination, with him having basically unlimited kill options and combo routes thanks to his block placement mechanic. Once you're in his clutches, you have to either, for lack of a better term, break your controller's sticks so that you can just barely escape a true zero-to-death combo, or alternatively, You can just lose your whole stock over a small error in your gameplay. You don't get them fresh out of the box. You have to pay an extra fee on top of your $60 purchase to have the highest statistical chance of victory. And while I'm not going to pretend like Steve's strengths in Ultimate are nearly as egregious as Bayonetta's were in Smash 4, anyone who's watched competitive Ultimate in a post-DLC meta will know that Steve, along with a large number of other fighters in the DLC and base game, are in desperate need of nerfs that just aren't coming. And I feel the lack of balance patches in recent years is a really big issue. Even outside of DLC, the game has not received a balance patch since 2021. On one hand, it's nice to know that if you're happy with the viability of your character, that nothing's going to change for you. You can just chill till the next Smash game comes out. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with the balance of your character, or the game as a whole, you have to face the fact that you're either going to have to begrudgingly deal with it, or quit. And don't get me wrong, Ultimate is remarkably well balanced, considering the sheer size of its roster. It's just a shame that there are still some holes left that could have been fixed with just a few more patches. Anyway, you may have noticed that I excluded a specific category of newcomers added to this game thus far, and that's because I felt they deserved their own segment. It's time to discuss the Echo Fighters in concept were an easy way to add crowd-pleasing characters without spreading the Ultimate dev team too thin. They're characters that mirror another fighter and reuse the bulk of their assets, but with slight differences in their design. They're placed right next to the characters they're built off of on the roster, and they don't increase the total number of unique fighters in the game. On paper, this sounds like a good idea, but Echo Fighters and the way that they were implemented frustrates me on so many levels. When the concept was first shown off, I was ecstatic, like, we're not getting a ton of fully new fighters this time around, right? So, reuse the models and assets of pre-existing fighters, while tweaking them to make something ultimately new and exciting, all while being self-aware about it, right? But that's largely not what they did. First, though, let's talk about the two Echo Fighters I did like. Ken is honestly barely even an Echo Fighter. Ryu and Ken's game plans are very different. Ken has a higher airspeed than Ryu, providing more of a rushdown fighter experience. Most of his moves either resemble Ryu's but function wildly differently, or are just straight up completely different moves. And if we want to get into the nitty gritty, he even has count 'em two, completely unique final smashes, while most Echoes and other clone characters don't even have one that's fully unique. Ultimate is very weird about who is or isn't considered an Echo, because in terms of differences compared to his source fighter, I'd argue he is on par with, or even more unique than most of the copycat characters, even the ones not given the Echo Fighter label. It feels kinda shameless to still have unlabeled, blatant clone characters on the roster like Dr. Mario, Pichu, and Toon and Young Link in a game where they introduced labels specifically for those types of characters. Hell, they added another one in this game with the inclusion of Isabelle. Anyway, the other Echo whose inclusion I like is Chrome's moveset is the same as Roy's, except for his up special, which draws from his Fire Emblem brethren Ike, replacing Roy's Blazer with Ether, a move that, in exchange for increased vertical reach, loses most of its horizontal range and is generally much more linear. This plays a huge part in differentiating Chrom from Roy, as it completely changes how both characters get back to the stage, and also alters the utility of using up special as an offensive tool. Chrom is also, like his daughter Lucina, more consistent, having a more balanced damage output throughout all of his sword, instead of only being strong at the hilt like Roy's. His small moveset change and his difference in overall move functionality provides a unique identity for Chrom compared to Roy in tangible ways that would actually make a person think before selecting one or the other, perhaps even switching depending on the matchup. When Chrom was initially revealed, it opened my eyes, showing that new Echoes could be much more than glorified alts, and actually have their own sense of individuality and reason to be chosen over their source character. In short, this is what every Echo should have been. Kind of new, kind of not new. Daisy, Richter, and Dark Samus, the remaining Echo newcomers, do not differ from their source fighters in any relevant way outside of minuscule differences in hurt boxes. Actually, wait. Richter's holy water is actually aura damage instead of fire, so It won't detonate bombs and can hurt red Pikmin, which normal fire wouldn't. That's all I got. They already demonstrated that they could give unique aspects to each Echo, but they just chose not to do that for most of them. It's just like, why would you go through the effort of getting the voice actors in the booth, creating whole new models and a handful of new animations for each new Echo fighter, just to do nothing unique with them? Now listen, I'm starting my 3rd year of university as a computer science student. I'm not going to pretend like I even know what goes on in AAA game development, but with my minimal knowledge in game dev, I ask, would it have been that hard to, even for these lesser different Echoes, to change numerical values like run speed or weight? Like maybe Richter's a little faster but weaker than Simon, or Daisy's a little stronger than Peach but in exchange she's a little slower. Just little things like that. I'm not even asking for whole different moves like with Ken or Chrom, even though they've already demonstrated that that's on the table. It just feels like a huge missed opportunity to not even make slight changes to these fighters. Another missed opportunity is that both Dark Samus and Daisy's original counterparts, Samus and Peach, were in Smash 4, and that game had unique custom moves for every base game fighter, a feature that was entirely cut from Ultimate. They could have just taken some of those unique custom move assets and just slapped them on the Echoes in this game at minimal cost of development resources, while instantly making these taken up roster slots feel more purposeful. And I know there is a feature that allows you to stack Echoes on top of their original counterparts so that they technically aren't taking up a slot and act more like an alt skin, but this feature also doesn't make much sense since 4 out of 7 of the Echo fighters in this game are functionally unique in one way or another. It feels like Nintendo was trying to be a little too self-aware about the clone characters in past titles and decided to double down hard and for the first time just make clones that were genuine carbon copies. Even the clone characters added in Smash 4, Lucina and Dark Pit, that were given the Echo Fighter label in this game still have gameplay differences compared to their original counterparts. And you know what's crazy? Daisy actually did have a difference at the beginning of Ultimate, with her and Peach's turnips having different knockback values, which changed their combo routes. This made choosing between the two an actual competitive choice, and not just a cosmetic one. And then they patched it out. Why they didn't want these characters to have any hint of individuality is beyond me.
Did you do that? Do it again.
In time.
No, do it now.
In time.
Why can't you just do it now?
Well, I'm afraid that would be a vulgar display of my power.
It would be a vulgar display of your power if you did it again, but it wasn't a vulgar display of your power when you did it 15 seconds ago?
That's right.
I could honestly go on all day about how the potential of Echo Fighters was squandered, but like all tragedies, eventually we must move on to the next. The online system in Ultimate leaves a lot to be desired. For starters, Nintendo made the decision to make Smashes Online utilize peer-to-peer connection. This means that Nintendo took the cheap option, opting out of paying for dedicated servers that would have provided a smoother connection, in favor of connections solely relying on the player's systems working as server and client. Meaning, even if you are running a great connection, Ethernet cable connected and all, the quality of your opponent's connection will be the defining factor in your experience. If your opponent opts out of using a LAN cable, or just has a poor connection overall, you will no longer be playing a fighting game, you'll be playing Google Slides. And this quality of online service would be totally forgivable, since it was the same in Smash 4, and why would we expect anything different now? Except we're actually paying for it now. In what kind of felt like a calculated move, in September 2018, just 3 months before Ultimate's release, Nintendo made playing its first-party games online come with a price, which is strange because they didn't upgrade the quality of the service in any way. You're getting the same exact online gameplay, it's just paywalled now. Of course, they bundled in playable retro games and cloud save backups with this purchase, but those two things don't actually enhance the quality or stability of online play. For Smash players, it's now gotten to a point where a good deal of players resort to using latency mods when trying to practice or compete in an online setting, which is just bleak. Non-modded online play, even on a consistent connection, generally has, at minimum, 10 frames of delay, as opposed to the base game's 6. This makes playing the game online much less reactive and much more predictive. There's a reason so many people tend to discredit the success of Wi-Fi Warriors, and why so many people insist that the results of their online matches would be different if they were played in person. Outside of complaints about Nintendo's online service as a whole, Ultimate's online mode by itself still has a lot of problems. Global Smash Power, or GSP, is Ultimate's online ranking system. A certain amount of GSP is earned if you win an online match, and a certain amount is deducted if you lose an online match. Your GSP indicates how many people in the online player base you're above in terms of skill. For example, as of May 26, 2025, my Donkey Kong was at the relatively higher end of skillful players at 15,334,128 GSP, which means that I was ranked higher than 15,334,127 people who have played this game online before. On paper, this is a cool metric to show growth on a large yet realistic scale. In practice, though, there are a lot of holes in this system. Firstly, there are no real ranks or other indicators of progress past just getting into Elite Smash, which you reach after gaining a certain amount of GSP with any individual fighter on the roster. And getting a character into Elite Smash is basically just the bare minimum metric of being a decent player, in my opinion. Due to this lack of a proper ranking system or official leaderboard, without outside resources like EliteGSP.com, it's just not possible for an average player to tell where they stand in terms of skill. And I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of having any form of a ranking system in the first place. There's no sense of progression or achievement here. As you get better at the game and your GSP increases with the fighters of your choice, you are bound to have a more competitive mindset and take your matches more seriously. And funnily enough, this is where a lot of the cracks in Ultimate's online design begin to show. Speaking from personal experience, gaining GSP at the higher end begins to feel like an uphill battle after a while. When you lose even one game, you have to win several games after the fact just to earn back the GSP you lost. I cannot count the number of times I've lost to someone once, then convincingly won the following 2 to 3 games against the same player, and still had myself down in GSP from that one singular loss. And there is no system that locks players into a proper competitive set, like a best of 3 or best of 5, which, combined with the harsh penalty for losing, not only allows, but encourages players to back out after winning only one game, before their opponent can figure them out. Also, you can have a win stolen from you at the very last moment of a match if your opponent decides to disconnect, and while you may still have one in spirit, your GSP will not change. I'd suggest they do away with the quick play format for Elite Smash and have it so GSP is only gained or lost at the end of a set, perhaps letting players choose between best of 3s or best of 5s, as I feel like this would encourage a huge part of playing fighting games, which is adaptation. And sometimes, skill in the context of your preferred rule set isn't even the defining factor in winning or losing. Ultimates Online uses the Preferred Rules feature, which in theory allows you to curate your ideal online experience and choose between casual or competitive play. In theory. The truth is that there's always a slim chance you won't even get to play on your preferred rule set when entering a match, even on Elite Smash. And I'm not just talking about having to play on Battlefield or Final Destination when you preferred Small Battlefield. You could be at the end of a grind session where you've nearly hit a personal GSP goal and run into someone running Stamina Mode or Free-for-All or Items, Teams, hell, all of the above and more. And if you lose, in a manner that is largely out of your control, you are set back as if you had just lost a game on your preferred rule set. It's silly that we were given the ability to select our preferences in the first place if the game can just disregard them at any moment. While it had problems of its own, Smash 4's Online greatly benefited from giving us choice and not just the illusion of it. It featured 2 separate online modes, for Fun, for casuals, which had all items and stages enabled, and for Glory, for serious matches, which had no items and Final Destination only. And along with that, you could actually switch fighters in between matches while battling the same online player, which you can't do in Ultimate. While it lacks the customization that Ultimates has, it's kinda sad that Smash 4's Online could more reliably let you play the way you wanted. And there is just one more complaint I have about Ultimates Online. Mii fighters. Mii Fighters are the only characters from Smash 4 that retain the custom moves feature, allowing players to customize each of their special moves with one of 3 move options. The problem is that there is absolutely no way of knowing what moves your Mii Fighter opponent will have during an online match. You don't know if the brawler you're facing is going to kill you off the top or off the side, if the sword fighter is going to fight you from afar or in your face, or if the gunner is going to be camping you from far away, or camping you from slightly less far away. The point is, during those short few seconds before the beginning of a match, and you see the character you're about to fight, you make a plan to combat that fighter's toolkit. And versus the Miis, that's simply not possible. And it gives them a huge advantage in the online landscape, especially in a culture that encourages one-and-doneing your opponent before they can adapt. But for all the hard time I've given it, if you're playing with a perfect connection on all systems involved, and you actually get your preferred rule set, Ultimates Online is fine. I'll give this mode a 6 out of 10. We can talk about the multiplayer parts of Ultimate all day, but what is a Smash game without its single-player modes? We can find those in Games and More, and for starters, we have Classic Mode. This mode features a unique challenge path for every fighter, including Echoes, with every character facing a thematic challenge in their respective Classic Mode run. The big bad Sephiroth has a pseudo-boss rush route since he himself is an iconic boss. Mario fights a bunch of mascots since he himself is a big mascot, stuff like that. I sadly have some complaints, big and small, about the way that this mode was handled in Ultimate, starting with the lack of variety for bonus stages. Ultimate Classic Mode's one and only bonus stage is a race to the finish with the main goal of earning points and making it to the end without being consumed by the black hole that slowly eats up the level. Now, I think this bonus stage in concept is totally fine. The issue is the pure repetitive nature of it. Every single Classic Mode run in the game features the exact same baby's first Mario Maker looking level, with absolutely zero variation. And I'd be okay with how the bonus stage looked quality-wise if there was a unique one for every fighter, but there just isn't. There are 86 unique Classic Mode runs in this game, and you have to trudge through the same bonus stage every single time. It's like if you had to play through Standard 1-1 in every single world of a Mario game, while each world also had completely different movement tools. It just makes no sense from a design standpoint, and feels really cheap. Now let's look at Melee's Classic Mode for comparison, which had 3 bonus stages for its Classic Mode runs, including a unique Break the Target stage for every single fighter. Now that's what I'm talking about, bonus stages taking advantage of each fighter's unique strengths and weaknesses. And mind you, Melee was developed from the ground up in a much shorter time frame than Ultimate. Another smaller complaint I have about the mode is the lack of boss variety. Near half the fighters on the roster just face plain old Master Hand or Crazy Hand at the end, and I'm not sure if it's an issue of just a pure lack of bosses that fit with certain fighters, or a lack of creativity on finding which fighters could fight which bosses. It's kind of funny that they decided to only bring Gallium back from Brawl, when bringing even one more boss back, like Rayquaza for example, would have diversified the Classic Mode runs of a really good portion of the roster. Overall, speaking as someone who's completed every Classic Mode run, and many more than once, while the references found throughout are cute, the mode winds up kinda just feeling like an afterthought. Next, we have Training Mode, which is the best it's ever been in Ultimate, since along with the features it had in the past, it also has a Training Mode specific stage that can help you measure launch distances, and additionally, you can enable trajectory lines that illustrate how your moves will launch opponents at 0, 50, and 100% damage. Training Mode in Ultimate is a step in the right direction, but there are still some things lacking, like the fact that you can't practice on hazardless stages, the forms most often used in competition, and that there is no way to practice a scenario that involves your opponent repeating the same specific series of moves or actions unless you have a really dedicated human training partner sitting next to you. This is unfortunately another aspect of the game that can only be fixed through modding, which isn't even accessible to every Nintendo Switch user, since depending on when you bought your system, your model may have standard modding methods patched out of its design. And frankly, modding is something people shouldn't have to resort to in the first place. Moving on to Mob Smash, it features 3 unique challenges, with the first being Century Smash, a subtle reference to the fact that it took me a century to actually play Mob Smash. It involves defeating 100 enemies as fast and efficiently as possible. The second challenge is called All-Star Smash, which involves trying to defeat every character on the roster in a randomized order. And the third and final challenge, Cruel Smash, involves defeating as many significantly stronger opponents as you can before being knocked out. As I kinda implied earlier, I really have not touched these modes much, it's just not what I play Smash for, but for the sake of this video, I played through all 3 modes, and I actually had a pretty good time, and I saw the value in the existence of all 3 challenges. Home Run Contest is just as good and overall functional as it's always been, now complete with some new striking visuals for when you launch your sandbag. I've always loved the simplicity in casually playing this mode, but the option of optimizing your damage output and becoming truly skillful in the mode is also really cool. I guess there's not much more to say about it. Stage Builder, returning from Brawl and Smash 4, is painfully limited. The best way I can accurately describe my frustrations with this mode is through personal experience. When Ultimate was still a brand new game, I loved tinkering with Stage Builder, and in particular I had this just evil series of stages I'd created called the Fun Levels. Fun House, Fun Arena, Fun Coliseum, just differently themed stages with the central concept of being thoroughly brutal and unfair. Portals that teleport you into a lava prison, cannons that shoot you into lava, circle-shaped lava mounds that slide down ramps, lava that just spawns without warning and kills you. I guess 14-year-old me was a lava kid. It's pretty evident that kid me wasn't super keen on putting lots of thought into these stages, but since I've gotten back into Ultimate over the last couple years, I wanted to give the mode another try, now that my brain has mostly developed. I returned to the fun stage concept in a slightly more balanced manner, the Fun Carnival. While I was excited to work on this stage at first, my enthusiasm waned rather quickly as the limits of this mode became apparent. The stage you see before you is not what I intended. The vaguely white and red Ferris wheel was supposed to further resemble a Pokeball, the tent was supposed to have a lot more to it, there was supposed to be a roller coaster of some kind, I wanted the hot air balloon to resemble a Smash Ball, and I generally wanted there to be a lot more detail, whether it be in the background, foreground, or actual parts of the stage, all of which had to be sacrificed due to Stage Builder's abhorrently strict and inconsistent size limiter, put in place to assure that the Switch's hardware could handle what you're making. The more I think about it, the less I feel like 14-year-old me was held back by my brain, and more so held back by the game itself. Stage Builder does not allow you to make something that fits your large-scale or even medium-scale vision, and even with its generally unappealing and limited choices in what you can actually build with, and even with the size limiter, the mode still finds a way to make the Switch chug more than nearly anything I've seen in a first-party Nintendo game. Even when the content displayed is largely not that visually intense or impressive, it's actually kind of embarrassing. The mode as a whole feels like a pile of wasted potential, and while it's a fun time waster, Ultimate's Stage Builder truly feels like a mode that was purposefully stripped of its depth. There's a bit of a problem with Nintendo in the modern day that's visible in their recent titles. Animal Crossing New Horizons, Mario Tennis Aces, and Mario Maker 2 are just some examples of games released in the Nintendo Switch era that launched with lacking features, roster sizes, or modes, with promises of that missing content being implemented later in post-launch updates. This practice of Nintendo releasing full-priced games half-baked is so commonplace nowadays that it is practically expected, and Smash Ultimate was not fully immune to these practices either. The Ultimate Smash game released without Home Run Contest or Stage Builder, 2 mainstay modes that you could not play at launch. The initial absence of these 2 modes, among other things, truly make it feel like this game was shipped before it was ready. Overall, while the single-player content here is fun, its occasional cheapness and lack of polish in certain areas disappointed me. I'll give Smash Ultimate's single-player modes a 7 out of 10. Ahem. A quote from the co-founder and president of the Valve Corporation, Gabe Newell. "Late is just for a little while. Suck is forever." A game being forced out the door while it's still cooking can lead to things that can't be fixed or erased with a simple patch. Monumental expectations will be let down, heads will tilt, and disappointment will set in. Of course, I'm talking about the big piece of single-player content that I've neglected to mention so far. I completed this mode when Ultimate first came out, but I actually replayed a good amount of World of Light for this video on a fresh account for the authentic experience. The first cutscene is the ultimate bait and switch, fooling us into thinking it'll be Subspace 2 with full-on voice acting and proceeding to not be that. The beginning of the cutscene feels like it would have been more fitting for the end of World of Light, with all the characters in the game standing on the edge of the cliff together, facing the big bad. It feels like a lot of really cool story beats that would have happened in a proper sequel to Brawl's beloved story mode happened off-screen. A lot of the appeal for Subspace Emissary, the original Smash story mode on the Wii, was the novelty of seeing character interactions that you wouldn't see in any other game, and having a story mode that lacks that in such a huge crossover in Ultimate just feels like a waste. Look at some of the non-roster characters that show up in this cutscene getting blasted by Galeem. Like, why is this Animal Crossing character in a generic wasteland battlefield alongside a static Star Fox character? They all just look so frozen, the models don't move at all. It's so off-putting having an otherwise super detailed cutscene and these guys are just staring into your soul. There's nothing that could stop this from feeling so cheap. The map is flat. It is a 2D image. How am I supposed to take this mode seriously when it feels like I'm walking on an oversized kid's playmat? And slapping a tail on a Yoshi and saying that's Eevee doesn't feel like a creative workaround. It feels like an insult to my intelligence. Inkling boy with glasses? No, you're clearly mistaken. That's Jeff.
Nice
Spirits!
losers. You don't like these?
Spirits!
But they're from...
Super Smash Brothers Ultimate!
Wait, there's lots of other
Spirits!
if you don't like the...
Inkling!
No, there aren't. They're all just the same with different costumes.
I didn't realize it was that kind of game.
Nobody knows what kind of game it is.
Is it?
It's a role-playing game! You have to use your imagination!
Despite it all, since Smash just has fun gameplay at its base, the gameplay loop of World of Light is just fun, and I think that's what they were going for. A relatively easy-to-produce adventure mode. However, the spirit fights do feel like they generally separate into two categories, either being hilariously easy or miserable slogs to get through. It's kinda rare to find one that's just a balanced challenge, and the fights do tend to blur together after a while. But even though spirits are just the Smash fighters from the roster with red eyes, and it's not convincing in any way, the gimmicks they all have exhibit the unique quirks of their spirit characters. There were some fun spirits like Buzz, which is just a fly. Ashley Robbins was a really interesting spirit battle where you fight Isabelle in Luigi's mansion, while a villager acts as a ghost, remaining invisible throughout the fight, dropping bowling balls and messing with you. I don't know, I just thought it was cool. Pocket Football Player involved fighting multiple mini-villagers on Omega PS2 with soccer balls constantly spawning. Then there are just spirits that are more like actions, like the Wii Fit Deep Breathing spirit. It's sad that the majority of the map doesn't really represent any series in particular with recognizable landmarks. Well, outside of the occasional Mario pipe or sub-level, it adds to the mode's lack of an identity. The place where you unlock Inkling, for example, doesn't really scream Splatoon. It's just a normal-looking city, albeit with some of the buildings being cute references to Nintendo's past consoles. It is cool that some places are only accessible with some character spirits unlocked, since it adds small shreds of much-needed personality to this mode. There are examples of more direct references, like a Bowser castle that has an entrance in the overworld, the sub-level adorned with classic castle features from the Mario series, like yellow folly blocks that don't actually fall here, lava, jump-on switches, green pipes, and Mario Castle music playing in the background. The first enemy inside is Mecha Koopa, and to enter the castle in the first place, you defeat Boom Boom, but outside of that, the enemies found throughout the rest of the area are mostly not Mario characters and are just generally fire-themed enemies, which is fine. You can't expect them to use up all the Mario enemies here. There is a cool fight in here where you face Kamek as he summons his clones. Again, while this is just Inkling Boy with a wand, they do find a way to make you reminisce about the history of the character being represented, which is cool, I guess. And the sub-area ends in a brawl with Giga Bowser, and as a cute final reference, at the end of this area, you rescue Peach. But even with over 600 unique spirit battles, this just doesn't feel like the biggest gaming crossover of all time. World of Light just reuses assets from the main game. Every single stage scene in World of Light is accessible outside of it, whether it be through normal gameplay or through classic modes if it's a boss arena. Most of the encounters are just normal stages. And the only real unique content to World of Light is, if you come across a particularly nasty fight, there will be a substance of varying status effects stuck to the floor of an Omega or Battlefield form of a stage, or the stage will get flipped upside down, or some other small gimmick dictated by your spirit opponent. But that's hardly anything, and it's usually not fun at all. Galeem and Darkon, the final bosses of World of Light, and the only boss fights fully exclusive to the mode, have their battles just take place on Final Destination with platform assets already used for the Battlefield form of the stage. And look, speaking as a creator who keeps reusing the same red underlines and red circles, along with a bunch of other assets throughout this video's production, I can respect a little recycling. But as a player, even Subspace Emissary, a side mode from a 2008 Wii game, had big, unique stages and levels, and a ton of dynamic, action-packed animated cutscenes to go along with its narrative. Narrative, what a concept. And you can say, at least they had an original idea for a mode, but they didn't. What are spirits? Images that enhance your fighter's stats in the story mode? That was just stickers from Brawl. They already did this in a better story mode. I expected to keep talking down on this mode, but the gears started to turn in my brain when I got enough spirits to start making interesting and strong builds. I used Mario from Mario Tennis Aces to give myself a chance to land a critical hit on my opponent, and I used the Great Fairy to heal my fighter in combat. It was then that the fun of this mode finally began to click for me, even if just for a short bit, before the monotony of fight after fight after fight set in once more. Also, there's a skill tree. Not a ton to say here, you gain skill points after every encounter, and can spend them to give your fighters permanent perks and buffs, which adds another RPG element to what is essentially a closed-off RPG fighting game hybrid. The boss fights are all super cool. Beast Ganon, Marx, Dracula, Rathalos, Darkon, Galeem, and Darkon and Galeem are all unique, new, and fun fights. And Master Hand, Crazy Hand, Giga Bowser, and Gallium all return from previous games. But the true highlight for me happens at the end of the mode, in a reverse boss fight of sorts, where you get to play as Master Hand and fight off a horde of enemies. Such an awesome full-circle moment for longtime fans, and even for new fans, it's just plain cool to take control of a boss. At its best, it's a fun, sometimes not so fun RPG spin on Smash. And at its worst, it's still a decent time waster. It's not perfect. Far from it, actually, but for all the qualms I have with the World of Light, it definitely has its moments. Overall, I'd give this mode a solid 6.5 out of 10. So far, I've covered most of what Smash Ultimate has to offer. We've looked at the good, the bad, and the questionable, but while I've spent most of this video walking through what the game does give us, for better or for worse, now it's time to shift gears a little. I want to take a moment to talk about the stuff that Smash Ultimate didn't give us. The way that more recent newcomers have been adapted into Smash is genuinely impressive. Most of these newer fighters are so faithful, so well crafted, that they each feel like personally written love letters to their respective franchises. But this has made the less faithful designs of fighters introduced earlier in the Smash series stick out a little. There is a stark contrast in the creativity and references found within new fighters like King K. Rool and Steve, compared to older fighters like Sonic, or most prominently, Ganondorf. Characters like Sonic and Ganon were developed under non-ideal conditions, like how Sonic was, ironically, a rush job when added into Brawl last minute, or how Ganon was originally implemented in a Smash game that could be called a rush job in its entirety, which led to both having very bland or just straight-up inaccurate movesets. These compromised designs, seen in their initial inclusions in the Smash series, mostly remained the same in future titles. Sonic, a character with an ungodly amount of games to pull unique moves from, largely only incorporates his most common move, the spin dash, in his moveset, which makes for a boring, visually confusing, and generally irritating fighter. As for Ganondorf, I don't think it'd be controversial to say that he has the most unfaithful design in all of Ultimate, if not all of Smash history. For those that don't know, and somehow haven't noticed, Ganondorf is a clone of Captain Falcon, and has been since Melee, where he was first introduced. This was particularly confusing, as usually when a clone character is introduced, they are at least a clone of a similarly themed fighter from their own series. Ganon, on the other hand, is a clone of a character whose only similar traits are that they are both buff men of remotely similar size, and if we really want to get into the nitty-gritty, Captain Falcon's moveset was completely made up for Smash back in '64, so they essentially took the only villain representing one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time, completely butchered his character, and decided to leave him like that for 20 years. Sure, he finally has the sword in Ultimate, but it's just for smash attacks, and frankly, after all this time, that just doesn't cut it. On one hand, I adore the movesets that a lot of legacy characters have in Ultimate. Many of my favorite characters to play, like Ganondorf or Luigi or even Donkey Kong, might not be perfect representations of their source material, but that doesn't stop them from being tons of fun regardless. On the other hand, though, it feels like several fighters on Ultimate's roster aren't the characters themselves, but instead caricatures. I think a great solution to this problem, to please all fans, would be to keep the legacy versions of these characters intact, while developing new versions of them that can stand as their own unique fighter and roster slot. I'm gonna sound like a hypocrite for saying this, since I play Donkey Kong competitively and have won many a set by cargo throwing my opponent off stage, or burying with side B, or ding-donging, so on and so forth. But mashing, i.e. doing as many inputs on your controller as physically possible to escape a grab or bury, is a deeply unfun mechanic, bordering on genuinely harmful, whether to your hands or to your controller. I've met many people who simply won't mash, either because they don't want to tire themselves out in the middle of an intense game, or because they don't want to shorten their controller's lifespan, which is completely understandable. Instead of mashing, maybe it'd be better for things like berries or grabs to last a certain amount of time no matter what, scaling with percent. Like maybe at 0%, a grab or berry lasts half a second, but at 80%, a grab or berry lasts 2 seconds, so that players on the receiving end can pay more attention to things like teching or DI, and the player executing the grab can focus on how many pummels they could do before executing the throw for maximum damage. I feel like there's a lot of potential depth in a system like this. And lastly, I'd also love to see a boss rush or boss replay mode implemented. There are so many cool bosses in this game, and it's kind of a shame that you can't replay these fights without taking a bunch of additional time out of your day just to get to them. Maybe the hypothetical mode could have each boss be able to be replayed after defeating them once in Classic Mode or World of Light, and have a full back-to-back boss rush mode unlocked once you've defeated each one. And perhaps as a reward for completing World of Light, you could unlock a mode that allows you to replay the section where you control Master Hand. I'm not asking for much here. A boss rush of sorts was already implemented in the final segment of World of Light, and the Master Hand sequence wouldn't need to be changed at all from how it is in World of Light, either. It's silly that some of the coolest aspects of this game are locked behind arbitrary obstacles, even after you've already reached them. Implementing all of the things I've mentioned here would by no means make Ultimate a perfect game, but it would make Ultimate a hell of a lot more fun. What is next for Smash? At least in terms of the roster, how on earth do you outdo this game? I think they've kind of dug themselves into a hole where, in a future Smash game, if any characters are removed and or the roster size is smaller than Ultimate's, that game would almost certainly be considered a downgrade. I think the concept of cut characters as a whole is kind of outdated now with the "everyone is here" tagline for Ultimate. What's the tagline of the next Smash game supposed to be? Everyone is not here, go home? As boring as it sounds, I think a Smash Ultimate Deluxe of sorts for the Switch 2 that retains all of Ultimate's fighters, along with adding a handful of new ones, really would be the best way to move forward. Over the last nearly 7 years, the biggest player base for a Smash game ever has definitely gotten attached to each and every one of the fighters on this roster. So many of these fighters have playstyles entirely unique to them, and if they're removed, their player bases would lose the piece of Smash they enjoy the most, and it would probably decrease the chances of them even buying the next game, especially since Ultimate is not only playable on the Switch 2 already, but it actually runs significantly better than on the Switch 1. And we all know that the Smash community isn't opposed to sticking with older titles. So, what are they going to do? Man, I don't know. Anyway, you have all waited long enough. It's time for the final score. With the general gameplays 10 out of 10, base game Newcomers 8.5 out of 10, base game rosters 10 out of 10, first Fighters Pass Newcomers 8 out of 10, second Fighters Pass Newcomers 9 out of 10, Online's 6 out of 10, single-player modes 7 out of 10, and World of Light's 6.5 out of 10 averaged out, my personal score for the overall quality of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for the Nintendo Switch is an 8.1 out of 10. And yeah, the score is pretty slanted by the roster, but I was honestly planning on giving it an 8 anyway, so it kinda worked out. A YouTuber who goes by the name Awesome Sauce made a really interesting point in their video, Is Melee a Good Game?, about the validity of a competitive player like me labeling Smash, Ultimate in this instance, as my favorite video game. This is mainly due to the fact that my favorite, most played part of Ultimate is a community-tailored rule set that is not preset fresh out of the box. Does a game have to be enjoyed in every aspect of itself to be worthy of being someone's favorite? Could Dark Souls 3 be my favorite single-player game, even though I don't enjoy using every build? Could an album with mostly meh songs but a few hard hitters be considered my favorite? Could a platform fighter with so-so single-player, rough online, and discontinued balance patches still be my favorite game by virtue of being immensely fun in the ways I choose to play it? While this is a subjective question, in my opinion, the answer is yeah. There's a high chance that Smash Ultimate will be replaced in the coming years, especially since the Switch 2 has been officially released. And there's mixed feelings in seeing that Ultimate is likely on its way out. I love Smash, and I especially love Ultimate. It was the gateway for me entering competition, finally finding my people, and giving me an excellent extracurricular for my college years. I spent my whole life playing Smash. And when you love something, you give it a hard time because you want it to be the best that it could possibly be. So please don't interpret all of the nitpicking in this video as hatred for a children's party game. Interpret it as love and hope for my favorite game of all time. Wait. I'm not done yet. It's time for the credits! That's right, after an hour of content, I'm sure the only thing on your mind is the credits, right? You want to watch the credits, right? Whew! Wow! The video is officially done. This video was a massive undertaking. It's the biggest project I have ever worked on by a long shot. I am so happy and so relieved that I actually finished it before college started back up, or that I finished it at all. I've written so many scripts and produced so many partially finished videos that never saw the light of day over the last 4 years, so I'm thankful that the biggest and best of them all actually made it onto YouTube in one piece. And I am happy that I chose to release it all in one piece, because there were multiple times throughout production where I debated releasing each chapter as a separate video. But I'm glad I didn't cave and do that, since I feel like this video is much more engaging as a complete package. It's obviously not perfect, but I'm still proud of it. The writing process took me from May 19th through June 29th, and the video production process took me from June 30th through August 31st, for a total of 104 days of on and off work to complete the final product. This is a video I've wanted to make for a really long time, and I'm glad that I managed to make it a reality. Going through this long-winded creative process reminded me of how much I enjoy script writing and putting that script to screen. So I think I'll try to make more videos like this one in the future, especially if this video does well. Anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, or even if you didn't watch the whole thing and are just watching this part for some reason, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed my love and hate letter to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Wait, I barely even talked about the music!